The warning came too late. Sensor Officer stared at his screen with all four of his eyes wide open. His clawed hands shook as he counted the signatures appearing from dark space. 100, then 1,000, then 10,000. The numbers kept climbing until his equipment simply stopped counting and displayed an error message he had never seen before. "Commander," said, his voice barely a whisper, "you need to see this." Commander of the Empire's Outer Defense Fleet walked over to the sensor station. He was a tall creature with gray skin and sharp teeth. He had served the Empire for 40 years. He had seen rebellions crushed. He had watched entire species bow before the might of the military. Nothing surprised him anymore. Until now. "What am I looking at?" asked. "Ships, Commander, thousands of them, maybe more," pointed at the screen with a trembling claw. "They came from the dark zone, the region we marked as empty." Felt something he had not felt in decades: fear. The dark zone was a vast area of space that contained nothing. No stars, no planets, no resources worth taking. The Empire had ignored it for centuries because there was nothing there. But something had been hiding in that emptiness, something that had been waiting. "Send a message to the Imperial capital," ordered. "Tell them we need reinforcements. Tell them." The first missiles hit before he could finish his sentence. Far away, on the bridge of a ship that they could not identify, Admiral watched the battle unfold. He was a man of 60 years with gray hair and a face marked by old scars. He wore a simple black uniform with no medals or decorations. He did not need symbols to prove his authority. Every human in the Armada would follow him into the fires of a dying star if he asked. "The Outer Defense Fleet is breaking apart," reported Captain from her station. She was young, only 32, but she had earned her position through skill and dedication. "Their shields cannot handle our weapons." "Expected," said calmly. "They have not faced a real enemy in 300 years. They have forgotten how to fight." "Sir, they are sending distress signals to their capital." "Let them," allowed himself a small smile. "Let them tell the Empire that death is coming. Let them feel what we felt." The Admiral turned to look at the main. It showed the ships burning and breaking apart. Escape pods launched in all directions, but human ships did not fire on them, had given strict orders about this. They were here for justice, not genocide. They would not become the monsters they had come to destroy. "Admiral," said Lieutenant from the communications station. He was a serious young man who rarely spoke unless necessary. "We are receiving transmissions from the enemy ships. They are asking who we are. They want to know where we came from." "Tell them nothing," replied. "Silence is our greatest weapon right now. Let them wonder, let them fear." In the Imperial capital, far across the galaxy, High Chancellor received the emergency transmission. He was the second most powerful being in the Empire, answering only to the Emperor himself. He had held his position for over a century by being smart, careful, and completely ruthless. The message made no sense to him. "Unknown ships," said to his advisors gathered in the war room. "How can there be unknown ships? We know every space-faring species in the galaxy. We have conquered most of them." "The design does not match any known civilization," said military advisor. "The weapons are unlike anything in our records. And the numbers," he paused, clearly uncomfortable. "The initial reports suggest over 50,000 vessels." "Impossible," declared. "No species could build such a fleet without us knowing. Our spies are everywhere. Our sensors watch every corner of space." "Except the dark zone," said quietly. Felt a chill run through his body. The dark zone. That empty region of space that the Empire had ignored since its founding. What if it had not been empty? What if something had been growing there, hidden from Imperial eyes, building strength for centuries? "Send the 3rd Battle Fleet," ordered. "Send the 5th as well. I want this threat eliminated before the Emperor hears about it." But the Emperor had already heard. In his private chambers at the top of the Imperial Palace, Emperor the Eternal sat on his throne and watched the reports coming in from the outer territories. He was ancient, over 400 years old, kept alive by the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy. His body was weak, but his mind remained sharp. And his mind was telling him that something was very wrong. "Show me everything," he commanded his personal AI assistant. "Every report, every image, every piece of data about these unknown ships." The AI compiled the information and displayed it before the Emperor. Ship designs that looked nothing like any known species, weapons that cut through shields like they were made of paper, and a symbol that appeared on every single vessel, a simple circle with a dot in the center. Stared at that symbol for a long time. It seemed familiar somehow, like something from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. "Search the historical archives," he ordered. "Find any reference to this symbol." "Searching," the AI replied. A moment later it spoke again. "I have found a match. The symbol appears in classified records from 312 years ago. The files are sealed by order of Emperor the Eternal." The Emperor felt his old heart skip a beat. He had sealed those records himself long ago. He had buried that secret so deep that he had almost forgotten about it. Almost. "Open the files," he whispered. "Authorization Prime." The records appeared before him. Reports of a primitive species discovered on a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. A species that showed unusual potential. A species that the Imperial scientists recommended for immediate termination before they could become a threat. Humans, they were called. The Emperor remembered now. He had ordered their extinction personally. The Imperial fleet had bombarded their planet until the surface burned. They had hunted down every colony ship that tried to escape. They had been thorough. They had been careful. They had made absolutely certain that not a single human survived. Or so they had believed. Back in the battle zone, Admiral watched as the last ship surrendered. The outer defense fleet was gone. The path to the inner territories lay open before them. "Casualties?" he asked. "None, sir," Captain reported. "No human ships were lost." Nodded. This was expected. They had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment. Every ship in the Armada was designed specifically to counter technology. Every weapon was built to break through defenses. Every soldier was trained to fight against tactics. The thought they had destroyed humanity. They were wrong. They had only made humanity stronger. "Set course for the next system," ordered. "We have a long journey ahead of us." "Sir," Lieutenant said carefully, "the crew is asking when they will be told the truth. Many of them have only heard stories about Earth. They want to know what really happened." Was quiet for a moment. He understood the question. Most of the people in the Armada were young. They had been born in exile, raised in the hidden colonies that humanity had built in the Dark Zone. They knew that their ancestors had fled from a great enemy, but the details had been kept secret for a reason. "Soon," finally said, "when we reach the Imperial border, I will tell everyone the truth. I will show them the records of what they did to our. I will let them see the images of Earth burning." His hands tightened into fists. "And then they will understand why we have come back." In her quarters aboard the flagship, an old woman named Grandmother sat alone. She was 103 years old, one of the last people alive who had actually been born on Earth. She had been a child when they came. She remembered the sky turning red as the bombardment began. She remembered her mother carrying her to an escape ship while the city collapsed around them. Now, after more than a century of waiting, she would see the Empire pay for what it had done. Looked at the small photograph she kept by her bed. It showed her family standing in front of their home in a city called her mother, her father, her older brother, all dead now, all gone. Only she remained to remember them. "We are coming," she whispered to the photograph. "We are finally coming home." The Armada moved forward, a wave of steel and fire sweeping through the outer territories. Colonies fell one after another. Some surrendered without a fight. Others tried to resist and were quickly overwhelmed. But in every case, the human forces showed mercy to civilians. They freed the slaves that they had taken from dozens of conquered species. They provided food and medical care to those in need. This was not just a war of revenge. It was a war of liberation. And it was only beginning. On the third day of the invasion, Admiral received a message from the High Chancellor, offered to negotiate. He wanted to know what the humans wanted. He was willing to discuss terms. Read the message carefully, then deleted it without responding. There would be no negotiations. There could be no negotiations. They had tried to wipe out his entire species. They had burned his to ash. They had hunted his ancestors like animals. Now they would learn what it meant to face humanity's wrath. The Armada continued its advance, unstoppable and silent. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years was about to fall, and no one had seen it coming. No one except the humans, who had waited in the darkness for 300 years, preparing for this moment, building their ships, training their soldiers, passing down the memory of what had been done to them from generation to generation. They had not forgotten, they had not forgiven. And now at last they had returned. Had spent her entire life searching for secrets. As the head of Imperial Intelligence Analysis, she was very good at finding information that others wanted to keep hidden. She had uncovered rebel plots, exposed traitors, and brought down corrupt officials. She believed she knew everything worth knowing about the Empire. She was wrong. The order came directly from High Chancellor himself. Find out who the enemy was, find out where they came from, find out how to stop them. Had accepted the mission with confidence. How hard could it be? The Empire had records of every species in the galaxy. But when she started searching, she found only dead ends. This makes no sense, she muttered to herself in her office. The room was filled with screens showing data from across the Empire. Ship designs, weapons analysis, communication intercepts. None of it matched anything in the Imperial database. Her assistant, a young named, brought her another cup of stimulant drink. Perhaps they are from outside the galaxy, he suggested. A species from another galaxy entirely. Impossible, replied. Intergalactic travel would take millions of years. No species could survive such a journey. Then where did they come from? Did not have an answer. She had been working for 3 days without sleep, and she was no closer to solving the mystery. The enemy ships continued their advance. The 3rd battle fleet had been destroyed. The 5th battle fleet had been destroyed. Nothing seemed to slow them down. Then she noticed something strange in the classified archives. There were files that she could not access. This was unusual. As head of Imperial Intelligence Analysis, had the highest security clearance in the Empire, second only to the Emperor himself. There should be nothing hidden from her. But here were dozens of files, all from approximately 300 years ago, all marked with the same classification code. Extinction Protocol. What is this? She asked. Have you ever seen this classification before? The young assistant looked nervous. I have heard rumors, he admitted. Old stories passed down among the senior staff. They say there was a species long ago that the Empire tried to destroy completely, a species that was considered too dangerous to exist. Felt her heart beat faster. What species? I do not know. The stories never say. They only say that the Emperor himself ordered their destruction and that the records were sealed forever. Made a decision. She was going to open those files, no matter what it took. If the answer to the current crisis was hidden in those records, she needed to find it. She spent hours trying different approaches. She used every hacking technique she knew. She called in favors from contacts in the palace. She even considered breaking into the Emperor's private archive directly, but nothing worked. The files remained sealed. Finally, she tried something desperate. She sent a message directly to the Emperor, requesting access to the Extinction Protocol files for the purpose of identifying the enemy threat. The response came within minutes. It was not what she expected. The Emperor wanted to see her, immediately, in person. Had never met the Emperor face to face. Few people had. The Eternal was more myth than reality to most citizens of the Empire. He had ruled for over 4 centuries, guiding the people to dominance over the entire galaxy. Some said he was immortal. Others whispered that he had died long ago and was now just a puppet controlled by his advisors. The truth discovered was much more disturbing. The Emperor's private chambers were dark and cold. Medical equipment lined the walls, pumping chemicals into the ancient body that sat on the throne, looked more dead than alive. His skin was gray and thin. His eyes were clouded. His breath came in shallow gasps. But his voice when he spoke was strong. "You want to know about the humans," the Emperor said. It was not a question. Felt a shock run through her body. "Humans, is that what they are called?" "That is what they called themselves. A simple name for a simple species, or so we thought." The Emperor gestured weakly, and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. "Watch, learn, understand what we are facing." The display showed images from 3 centuries ago. A beautiful blue planet covered with water and green land. Cities filled with strange bipedal creatures. Vehicles moving across the surface. Aircraft flying through the sky. Ships orbiting in space. "This was there," the Emperor explained. "They called it Earth. When our scouts discovered them, they were just beginning to explore beyond their own solar system. Primitive, weak, divided into competing nations that constantly fought each other." "Why did you order their destruction?" asked. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. "Because our scientists were afraid of them. Afraid of primitives." "The humans were not like other species," the Emperor said. "They evolved on a harsh world where survival was difficult. This made them tough, adaptable, aggressive. But more than that, they had something that our scientists had never seen before, a drive to improve, to grow, to become more than they were." He changed the display to show graphs and projections. In just a few thousand years, they went from living in caves to building spacecraft. The speed of their development was unprecedented. Our scientists calculated that if left alone, they would surpass technology within 500 years. And unlike us, they would not be content to maintain their position. They would keep advancing, keep growing, keep becoming more powerful. "So you decided to destroy them before they could become a threat," said. "I decided to ensure the safety of my empire," the Emperor replied coldly. "I ordered the complete elimination of the human species. Every colony, every station, every ship. We hunted them across the stars. We burned there until nothing remained but ash and glass. But some of them escaped." "Apparently so." The Emperor's eyes seemed to focus on something far away. "A handful of ships must have fled into the dark zone, the region we considered empty and worthless. They hid there for 300 years, building, planning, waiting. Understood now why the Empire was in such danger. The humans had 3 centuries to prepare. 3 centuries to study technology and develop counters to it. 3 centuries to build a fleet specifically designed to destroy the Empire. And they had done it all while the Empire ignored them completely. "What do we do now?" asked. "How do we stop them?" The Emperor laughed. It was a terrible sound, like bones grinding together. "Stop them? Do you not understand? We cannot stop them. We created this enemy. We gave them a reason to hate us that will never fade. Every human alive carries the memory of what we did to their ancestors. Every human child is raised with stories of the burning of Earth. There must be something we can do." "There is one thing," the Emperor's voice dropped to a whisper. "We can surrender. We can beg for mercy. We can hope that they are not as cruel as we were." Left the Emperor's chambers feeling sick. She had served the Empire her entire life. She had believed that they were the rightful rulers of the galaxy. Now she learned that her civilization was built on the attempted genocide of an innocent species. And that species was coming for revenge. She walked through the palace corridors in a daze. Servants and officials rushed past her, all of them panicking about the advancing enemy fleet. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew that their ancestors had tried to wipe out an entire species and failed. When she reached her office, she found waiting for her. The young assistant looked frightened. "What did you learn?" he asked. Sat down heavily in her chair. "We are going to lose this war." "What? How can you say that?" "Because we deserve to lose," closed her eyes. 300 years ago, we tried to destroy an entire species. We burned their planet. We killed billions of innocent people. We thought we had succeeded. And the enemy fleet. Humans, survivors of our genocide. They have been hiding in the dark zone all this time, preparing to come back, and now nothing can stop them. Was silent for a long moment. What should we do? "I do not know," opened her eyes and looked at her assistant. "But I think I need to find out more about these humans, not how to fight them, how to understand them. If there is any chance for peace, we need to know who they really are." She began accessing every file she could find about the species called humans. Most of the information was from the original scouting reports, made before the extermination order was given. She read about their history, their cultures, their achievements, and their failures. What she found surprised her. The humans were violent, yes. They had fought countless wars against each other throughout their history, but they were also capable of great kindness. They built hospitals to care for the sick. They created art and music that stirred emotions. They developed systems of law to protect the weak from the strong. And most importantly, they had a concept that they had never truly understood: forgiveness. They forgive their enemies, read from one of the reports. Even after terrible conflicts, they eventually make peace with those who harmed them. They rebuild. They move forward. They let go of hatred. Could they forgive after what the Empire had done to them? Did not know, but she knew that their only hope was to try. If the humans were truly capable of forgiveness, then perhaps the war could end without the complete destruction of the people. She began writing a proposal for the High Chancellor, a plan to reach out to the human leadership, to acknowledge the crimes of the past, to offer genuine surrender and accept whatever punishment the humans demanded. It was a desperate plan. It might not work, but it was the only chance they had. Far away, on the human flagship, Admiral received reports of the Empire's confusion. Their intelligence services were finally learning the truth. Soon, all would know who they were fighting and why. "Good," said quietly. "Let them remember what they did. Let them understand why we have come." Captain stood beside him on the bridge. "Admiral, do you think they will surrender?" "Some will, others will fight to the end," looked out at the stars. "But the result will be the same. The Empire will fall, and humanity will finally have justice." "And after that, what happens when the war is over?" Was quiet for a long time. "That is the question I have been asking myself for 60 years, he finally said. "Our people have lived for revenge. It has driven everything we have done. But revenge is not a future. It is not something you can build a civilization on." "So what do we build?" "Something better," turned to face his captain. "We build something better than revenge. We build something that honors the memory of Earth not through hatred, but through creation. We build a galaxy where no species ever faces extinction again." It was a beautiful dream. Hope that his people would be able to achieve it. But first, they had to finish what they had started. The Armada moved deeper into Imperial space, bringing fire and freedom wherever it went. The empire that had ruled unchallenged for 1,000 years was crumbling, and in the ruins, something new would be born. The children of Earth were coming home. Commander had never seen a slave camp before. He had heard stories, of course. Every human knew what the Empire did to the species it conquered. but hearing about something and seeing it with your own eyes were very different things. The camp on the planet held over 50,000 prisoners from a dozen different species. They were kept in metal cages, fed barely enough to survive, and forced to work in the mines until their bodies gave out. The average life expectancy for a slave was 3 years. After that, they were considered used up and discarded like broken tools. Ground forces had liberated the camp 2 hours ago. The guards had fled when they saw the human soldiers coming. Now walked among the freed prisoners, trying to help where he could. Water, croaked a small creature with blue fur and large eyes. It reached out a thin arm toward, "Please, Water." Handed over his canteen, he watched as the creature drank desperately, water spilling down its chin. It had probably not had clean water in days. "What is your name?" asked gently. The creature replied, "I am of the people." "Well, you are free now. We have ships that will take you home if you want, or you can stay and help us fight the Empire." His large eyes went even wider. "Fight, you would let us fight." "If you choose to, we are not like we do not force anyone to do anything," smiled. "But I have to warn you, many freed slaves have joined us. They want revenge on the Empire just as much as we do." This was true. In the 3 weeks since the invasion began, over 2 million former slaves had volunteered to join the human forces. They served as soldiers, pilots, engineers, and medics. They did whatever was needed to help bring down the empire that had stolen their freedom. The alliance was growing stronger every day. Left in the care of a medical team and continued his inspection of the camp. Everywhere he looked, he saw the results of cruelty: starving prisoners, bodies waiting to be buried, children who had never known anything but suffering. His second-in-command, Lieutenant, caught up with him near the camp's central building. She was a tough woman with short hair and a scar across her left cheek. She had grown up in the hidden colonies raised on stories of what they had done to Earth. "Commander said, we have finished securing the perimeter. No sign of enemy reinforcements." "Good. How many survivors in total?" 43,612. About 2,000 more need immediate medical attention. The rest are weak but stable. Nodded. Begin evacuation to the support ships. Make sure everyone gets food and water. Sorry. Find me the ones who want to fight. I have a feeling we are going to need them. Over the next few days, the liberation continued across dozens of worlds. Every planet the human armada captured revealed more horrors, more slave camps, more mass graves, more evidence of the Empire's cruelty toward conquered species. And with each liberation, more volunteers joined the cause. Admiral observed the growing alliance from the bridge of his flagship. He had not expected this. When he had planned the invasion, he had focused only on military targets. He had not considered that the Empire's victims would want to join the fight. But it made sense when he thought about it. Humans were not the only species with a reason to hate They had been conquering and enslaving other races for 1,000 years. They had made enemies across the entire galaxy. Now those enemies were uniting against them. "The Confederation has officially joined our alliance," Captain reported. "They are sending 30 warships and 10,000 ground troops." Asked. "They have no warships left. The Empire destroyed their fleet 50 years ago, but they are offering technical support. Apparently, they have some of the best engineers in the galaxy." Allowed himself a small smile. "Accept all offers. We need every advantage we can get." The truth was, the war was going almost too well. The human fleet had been designed to fight the Empire alone. With allies joining every day, their advantage was growing to overwhelming levels. They were being pushed back on every front, but knew that easy victories could become a trap. The Empire still held the core worlds. They still had vast reserves of ships and soldiers, and most importantly, they still had weapons that no one else possessed. Weapons of mass destruction. The warning came from an unexpected source. The intelligence officer had managed to send a secret message to the human fleet. She had used old communication codes that the Empire had long since abandoned, codes that only appeared in the historical records that she had accessed in the Emperor's archives. "The Emperor is planning something," the message said. "I do not know the details, but he has activated something called the Final Option. It is a weapon designed to destroy entire star systems. He will use it if the war continues to go against us. Please, you must stop this before it is too late." Read the message 3 times. He did not trust it. Why would an intelligence officer warn the enemy about a secret weapon? It could be a trick, a way to lure the human fleet into a trap. But he could not ignore it either. If the Empire truly had a weapon capable of destroying star systems, they might use it on the hidden colonies, on the places where humanity had been rebuilding for 300 years, on the children who had never known war. He called a meeting of his senior officers. "We have a choice to make," told them. "We can continue our current strategy, push into the core worlds, take them one by one, eventually defeat the Empire through superior numbers and tactics." "What is the other option?" asked Commander, attending via holographic link from his position on the ground. "We strike at the heart immediately. We go directly to the Imperial capital and force a surrender before the Emperor can use his final weapon." The officers exchanged nervous glances. A direct assault on the Imperial capital would be incredibly dangerous. The defenses there were the strongest in the Empire. They would take heavy losses. "What do we know about this weapon?" Captain asked. "Almost nothing. The message mentioned that it can destroy star systems. If true, it is probably some kind of massive gravity weapon or antimatter bomb." Shook his head. "Our intelligence has no information about it. The Empire kept it completely secret." "Then we have to assume the worst," said Chief Engineer, an old man who had designed half the ships in the human fleet. "If they can destroy star systems, they can destroy our hidden colonies. Everything we have built for 300 years could be wiped out in an instant." "Which is why I am leaning toward an immediate strike on the capital," said. "But I want to hear all opinions before I make a decision." The debate continued for hours. Some officers wanted to keep the current strategy. They argued that rushing into a direct assault would result in unnecessary deaths. Others supported the idea of a quick strike. They believed that the risk of the final option was too great to ignore. In the end, made the decision himself. "We attack the capital," he announced. "We move fast, hit hard, and force the Emperor to surrender before he can activate his weapon. I know this will be dangerous. I know we will lose people, but I believe it is the only way to protect our homes." The officers saluted and left to prepare for the assault, remained alone on the bridge, staring out at the stars. He had been fighting this war in one way or another for his entire life. He had trained for it, planned for it, dreamed about it. But now that it was actually happening, he felt nothing but tired. Tired of death, tired of hatred, tired of carrying the burden of his people's survival. "Admiral," a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see Grandmother standing in the doorway. She was the oldest person in the fleet, one of the few who actually remembered Earth. "Grandmother," said respectfully, "what brings you to the bridge?" Walked slowly across the room and stood beside him at the viewport. "I heard about the decision, the direct attack on the capital." "Do you think it is a mistake?" "I think it is necessary," was quiet for a moment. "When I was a child before the came, my mother used to tell me stories about our history, about all the terrible things humans had done to each other over the centuries. Wars, genocides, cruelty beyond imagination." "We have not forgotten," said. "No, but she also told me about the good things, the times when we rose above our worst instincts, the times when we chose mercy over revenge, the times when we built instead of destroyed." Looked up at the Admiral with her old, wise eyes. When this war is over, we will have to make that choice again. Do we become like or do we become something better? Did not have an answer. He had spent his whole life preparing to destroy the Empire. He had not thought much about what would come after. Get some rest, Admiral said gently. You have a long fight ahead of you, and after that an even longer peace. She left him alone with his thoughts. Far away, in the Imperial Palace, Emperor gave the order to begin preparations for the final option. If the humans reached the capital, if all seemed lost, he would activate the weapon. He would destroy them all, even if it meant destroying himself in the process. The Empire would not fall to a species it had tried to exterminate. He would make sure of that. The final battle was coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. Captain checked her equipment one last time. Compact rifle, 6 energy cells, 2 thermal grenades, emergency beacon, poison pill in her back tooth just in case. She was as ready as she would ever be. The infiltration team consisted of only 5 people, was the leader. Her specialists were the electronics expert, the weapons specialist, the medic, and who was the best close combat fighter had ever seen. Their mission was simple in description, but nearly impossible in execution. Get inside the Imperial Palace and disable the final option before the Emperor could use it. Remember, told her team as they prepared to launch from the stealth ship that had brought them to the capital system, we are not here to kill the Emperor. We are here to stop the weapon. If we can do that without being detected, perfect. If we have to fight, we fight. But the weapon is the priority. What if we cannot disable it? Asked. He was nervous. They all were. This was likely a one-way mission. Then we destroy it, and if we cannot destroy it, we die trying. His voice was calm. I will not sugarcoat this. The chances of us surviving are small, but if we succeed, we save our people. We save our homes. We save everything we have built. No one argued. They all understood what was at stake. The stealth shuttle launched from the ship and began its descent toward the Imperial capital. The planet below was a massive urban sprawl, covered entirely by buildings and structures. Over 50 billion lived here, the heart of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. And somewhere in the center of it all was the Emperor's palace, where the final option waited to be activated. The shuttle landed in a maintenance district far from the palace. His team moved through the streets carefully, disguised as maintenance workers. The disguises were not perfect. Humans were taller and differently shaped then, but in the chaos of a city preparing for siege, no one looked too closely at a group of workers going about their business. The palace security grid is more complex than we expected, reported as they approached the outer wall. He was looking at a small device that displayed the security layout. There are at least 15 layers of defense, motion sensors, heat detectors, DNA scanners, and something I have never seen before, some kind of neural scan that can detect hostile intent. Can you bypass it? Asked. The first 14 layers, yes. The neural scan, shook his head. I have no idea. That technology should not exist. Considered their options. They could try to force their way through, but that would alert the entire palace. They could abort the mission, but that was not really an option, or they could take a risk. We go forward, she decided. When we reach the neural scan, we will figure something out. They entered the palace through an underground tunnel that connected to the waste processing system. It was dirty and dangerous, but it was also the least monitored entrance. They moved quickly through the dark passages, avoiding patrols and security checkpoints. The first 14 security layers fell just as had predicted. He was a genius with electronics, able to trick sensors and disable alarms with a touch. But when they reached the chamber where the neural scanner was located, they stopped. I need time to study this, said, examining the device. Maybe an hour, maybe more. We do not have an hour. Looked around the chamber. There had to be another way. Then stepped forward. I have an idea, but you will not like it. Tell me anyway. took off her maintenance disguise, revealing the black combat uniform underneath. The scanner detects hostile intent, so we send someone through who does not have hostile intent. We all have hostile intent, pointed out. We are here to sabotage their weapon. I know, took a deep breath, but I can control my thoughts. I trained for years in mental discipline. If I focus only on peaceful images, only on calm emotions, I can pass through the scanner. And if you fail, then the alarm sounds and you all run while I hold them off. Did not like it, but she did not have a better plan. Do it, she said. Walked toward the neural scanner. She closed her eyes and began breathing slowly, deeply. In her mind, she was not in an enemy palace on a mission of war. She was in a garden back home in the colonies. She could smell the flowers. She could hear the birds singing. She could feel the warm sun on her face. She stepped through the scanner. Nothing happened. No alarm, no alert, just silence. Opened her eyes and smiled. Then she waved for the others to follow. One by one, they passed through the scanner, each of them focused on peaceful memories, childhood, family, love, the things that made life worth living, the things they were fighting to protect. They were inside. The final option was located in the deepest level of the palace, far below the throne room where the emperor sat. His team moved through corridors of polished black stone, past statues of ancient conquerors, past paintings depicting the empire's great victories. She noticed that none of the art showed the species the empire had conquered. No images of slaves, no depictions of genocide. They had erased their crimes from their own history, showing only glory and triumph. It made her sick. Finally, they reached the chamber where the final option was kept. It was a massive room, filled with machines and control panels surrounding a central device. The device itself was surprisingly small, about the size of a person. It glowed with a faint blue light. "That is it," whispered. "That little thing can destroy star systems." Antimatter, explained, already working on the control panels. Compressed and contained in a stable field. If released in the right way, it could tear apart the fabric of space itself. "Can you disable it?" "I think so. Give me a few minutes." Deployed her team around the room, watching the entrances. Everything was going according to plan. Too well, perhaps. She had learned to be suspicious when things went too smoothly. Her suspicion proved correct. The door at the far end of the chamber opened and Emperor walked in. He was alone, without guards, moving slowly on weak legs. He looked even more ancient and frail than had described in her secret messages. But his eyes were sharp, and in his hand was a small device. "I knew you were coming," the Emperor said. His voice echoed in the vast chamber. "I have been watching you since you entered the palace." Aimed her rifle at him. "Do not move." "Or what? You will kill me," laughed weakly. "I am already dying, have been for years. This body holds together only through machines and medicine. Death does not frighten me." "Then step aside and let us disable the weapon." "I cannot do that." The Emperor held up the device in his hand. "This is the activation trigger. One press of this button and the final option deploys. Your fleet, your hidden colonies, everything your species has built will be destroyed in an instant." Felt cold fear grip her heart. They were so close, and now it all depended on the words of an ancient tyrant. "Why did you do it?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Why did you try to destroy us? We had done nothing to you. We were just beginning to explore space. We were no threat." "No threat," the Emperor's eyes flashed with something that might have been fear. "You were the greatest threat the galaxy had ever seen. My scientists showed me the projections. Your species would have surpassed us within 5 centuries. You would have kept growing, kept advancing, kept becoming more powerful. And unlike us, you were not content with stability. You always wanted more. So you murdered billions of innocent people because you were afraid of what we might become." "I did what was necessary to protect my empire." His voice was cold, And I would do it again. Wanted to pull the trigger. She wanted to watch this monster die, but she knew that would not solve anything. He would press the button before the shot reached him. They would all die, and the weapon would still fire. So she did something unexpected. She lowered her rifle. "Then do it," she said. "Press the button, kill us all." The Emperor stared at her in surprise. "You want to die?" "No, but if that is the only choice you are giving us, then we will die on our feet, not begging for mercy." Stood tall, meeting the Emperor's eyes without fear. "That is something you never understood about us. We do not surrender, we do not give up. You burned our planet and killed our families, and we survived. You hunted us across the stars, and we grew stronger. You thought you could destroy us, but here we are, standing in your palace, ready to end your empire. And if I end you first, then you end us, but you will not end humanity," smiled grimly. "There are millions of us scattered across the hidden colonies. You cannot kill them all, and they will keep coming, generation after generation. They will never forget what you did. They will never stop fighting." The Emperor's hand trembled. For the first time, saw doubt in his ancient eyes. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Surrender, unconditional, step down from your throne, face justice for your crimes, and in exchange we will spare your people. We will not do to them what you did to us." "You expect me to believe that? Your kind lives for revenge." "No," shook her head. "We lived for survival. Revenge was just the tool we used to motivate ourselves. But when this is over, we want peace. We want to build a future, not spend eternity hating the past." The chamber was silent. The Emperor stood frozen, the trigger in his hand, weighing his options. He could destroy the humans who had come to kill his empire, but he could not destroy all of them, was right about that. The survivors would keep coming forever. Slowly, painfully, he lowered the device. "I accept your terms," Emperor said. "I will surrender. I will face whatever justice you demand, but promise me one thing." "What?" "Promise me that you will be better than we were. Promise me that you will not repeat our mistakes." Nodded. "We will try." It was the most honest answer she could give. Far above the palace, the human armada waited for word from the infiltration team. Admiral stood on the bridge, watching the Imperial Defense Fleet preparing for battle. Hundreds of thousands of ships, the largest military force ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. And with one message from, it would all be over. The message came 3 hours later. "Mission accomplished. The Emperor has surrendered. The final option is disabled. The war is over." Read the message twice. Then he sat down in his command chair and closed his eyes. Over, it was over. 300 years of exile. 300 years of planning and building and waiting. And now, finally, humanity had won. But even in victory felt the weight of what came next. They had conquered an empire. Now they had to build something to replace it, something better, something that would last. He hoped they were ready for the challenge. The final battle never happened. When word spread that the Emperor had surrendered, most of the Imperial Defense Fleet stood down without firing a shot. Some commanders refused to accept the surrender and tried to continue fighting. They were quickly overwhelmed by the combined human and allied forces. Within a week, the Empire had ceased to exist. Admiral walked through the halls of the Imperial Palace, now occupied by human forces. Everywhere he looked, he saw symbols of a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. Statues, paintings, trophies from conquered worlds. All of it would have to be dealt with eventually, preserved, destroyed, or returned to its rightful owners. But that could wait. Right now, he had a meeting to attend. The council chamber had been converted into a temporary headquarters for the new government. Representatives from every species that had joined the alliance sat around a massive table. Humans, and dozens of others whose had been conquered by the Empire. For the first time in history, they were all equal partners. Took his seat at the head of the table. He had not wanted this position. He was a soldier, not a politician, but the other species had insisted. Humanity had led the liberation, they said. Humanity should lead the rebuilding. "Thank you all for coming," began. "We have much to discuss. The Empire is defeated, but our work is just beginning. We need to establish new systems of government. We need to help the liberated worlds rebuild. We need to decide what to do with themselves." This last point was the most difficult. Many of the representatives wanted harsh punishment for the species that had oppressed them for so long. Some called for exile. Others wanted executions. A few suggested doing to what they had done to everyone else. Listened to all the arguments, then he spoke. "I understand the desire for revenge. More than anyone here, I understand it. They tried to wipe out my entire species. They killed our families." He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. "But if we respond with the same cruelty they showed us, we become no better than they were." "Then what do you suggest?" asked the representative, a tall insect-like creature with hard eyes. "Justice, not revenge, but justice. We put the Emperor and his top commanders on trial for their crimes. We present evidence. We allow them to defend themselves. And then we punish them according to what they deserve, not according to our anger." And the common, the soldiers and citizens who supported the Empire. Most of them knew nothing of the worst crimes. They were taught that the Empire was good and right, that the conquered species were inferior and deserved to be ruled. Shook his head. "We cannot punish billions of people for the lies they were told. We can only try to show them a better way." The debate continued for hours. In the end, his view prevailed. There would be trials for those responsible for the greatest crimes. The rest of the population would be given a chance to integrate into the new galactic order, with education about the true history of the Empire and its victims. It was not perfect, it would not satisfy everyone, but it was a start. Outside the council chamber, Captain waited with her team. They had become heroes since the infiltration mission. The soldiers who had faced the Emperor and convinced him to surrender. The squad that had stopped the final option from destroying the galaxy. Did not feel like a hero. She felt tired. The mission had taken everything she had. Facing the Emperor, offering him a chance at peace instead of pulling the trigger, had been the hardest thing she had ever done. But it had been the right thing. "Captain," Commander approached her with a formal salute. "Admiral wants to see you after the council meeting." "What about?" He would not say, but I think it is something important. When the meeting ended, entered the council chamber. Was alone, sitting at the table and staring at a holographic display of the galaxy. Thousands of stars, hundreds of civilizations, all now free from imperial rule. "You wanted to see me, Admiral?" "Yes," gestured for her to sit. "I have been thinking about what comes next, for humanity, for the galaxy, for me personally. And I am old. I have spent my entire life fighting this war. Now that it is over, I am not sure I have anything left to give." He turned off the display and looked at her directly. "I want you to take my place." Stared at him in shock. "Admiral, I am just a captain. I am not qualified to." "You convinced the Emperor to surrender when everyone else would have tried to kill him. You chose peace over revenge, even with a monster who deserved death," smiled slightly. "That is exactly the kind of leader we need right now. Someone who can see beyond hatred. Someone who can build instead of destroy." "What about the other officers, Captain Commander?" "They are excellent soldiers, but soldiers are not what we need anymore. We need builders, diplomats, people who can create a new future instead of fighting old wars." Sat in silence for a long moment. She thought about everything she had been through. The training, the mission, the moment in the palace when she had looked into the Emperor's eyes and chosen a different path. "I will try," she finally said, "but I will need help, lots of help." "You will have it. Every human in this fleet will follow you just as they followed me, and our allies will support you as well. They trust us now because we showed mercy when we could have shown cruelty. And you, what will you do? Rest leaned back in his chair, looking older than had ever seen him. For the first time in 60 years, I can rest. I think I have earned that. The transition of power happened quietly, without ceremony. Retired to one of the liberated worlds, where he spent his remaining years tending a small garden and teaching children about the history of Earth. He died peacefully, surrounded by friends and family, knowing that his people were safe at last. Proved to be an excellent leader. She spent years building relationships between humans and other species, creating a new galactic government based on cooperation rather than domination. Under her guidance, the former slaves of the Empire became free citizens with full rights. Even after completing rehabilitation programs, were allowed to participate in the new society. The trials for the Emperor and his commanders lasted for 3 years. They were broadcast across the galaxy so everyone could see justice being done. Was found guilty of genocide, mass murder, and crimes against sentient life. He was sentenced to spend the rest of his days in a prison on a distant moon, where he could watch the civilization he had built continue without him. He died there 10 years later, alone and forgotten. Grandmother did not live to see the full transformation of the galaxy. She passed away 2 years after the victory, at the age of 105. Her last words were addressed to the photograph of her family that she had carried with her for nearly a century. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "We came home." Her funeral was attended by humans from across the liberated territories. They buried her ashes on a new world that they had named New Earth, in a garden that overlooked a blue ocean, similar to the one that had once existed on their original. 50 years after the fall of the Empire, the galaxy was almost unrecognizable. Species that had been enemies were now partners. Worlds that had been devastated by war were thriving with new life. Technology was being developed not for weapons but for medicine, farming, and exploration. And humanity had finally found its place. They were not conquerors. They were not rulers. They were builders and healers, teachers and explorers. They used the same drive that had once worried that unstoppable need to grow and improve, to make the galaxy better for everyone. On the anniversary of the victory, a ceremony was held at the memorial built on the ruins of the Imperial Palace. Representatives from every species in the galaxy gathered to remember those who had died and to celebrate the peace that had followed. An elderly, now retired from leadership but still respected by all, gave the final speech. "100 years ago," she said, her voice still strong despite her age, "they tried to destroy us because they were afraid of what we might become. They believed that our drive to grow, to improve, to become more than we were, made us dangerous. They were right to be afraid. That drive is powerful and it can be used for terrible things." She paused, looking out at the crowd of different species, all living together in peace. But they were also wrong, because that same drive can be used for good. It can be used to build instead of destroy, to heal instead of harm, to create a galaxy where every species, no matter how different, can live in freedom and dignity. She raised her hand toward the stars. "We are the children of Earth. We survived genocide. We rebuilt in exile. We came back and toppled an empire, and then we did something even harder. We chose mercy. We chose peace. We chose to become something better than the monsters who had tried to destroy us." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the vast memorial. "That is who we are. That is what humanity means. Not conquest, not revenge, but hope, always hope. For as long as the stars shine, we will never stop hopping for a better tomorrow." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence for all who had been lost. Then, slowly, the representatives dispersed to their homes across the galaxy. Some returned to ancient worlds that had been free for. Others went to new colonies on the frontier of explored space. And somewhere, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, the descendants of the survivors had finally come home. They had built new cities on the ashes of the old. They had planted new forests where nothing had grown for 3 centuries. They had turned a graveyard into a garden. Earth lived again. And humanity, scattered across 1,000 worlds but united in spirit, looked toward the future with the same unstoppable drive that had always defined them. Not because they wanted to conquer, not because they needed to prove themselves, but because that was simply who they were. The children of Earth, the survivors, the builders, forever reaching for the stars.